Imagine a Supreme Court judge, one of the nation's most powerful legal minds, turning rogue, undermining the very justice they swore to uphold. Pam Bondi, known for her relentless pursuit of justice, is about to uncover the shocking truth. A corrupt judge, bribery, and a betrayal so deep that it could bring the entire judicial system to its knees. This isn't just a case. It's a war for the soul of America's highest court. Pam Bondi had fought against corruption and injustice her entire career. But what she faced now was a battle unlike any other. This wasn't just about a single case. It was a full-scale attack on the very integrity of the judicial system. A sitting Supreme Court judge, one of the most powerful legal minds in the country, had gone rogue. This wasn't a matter of questionable rulings. It was deliberate, calculated corruption designed to undermine the justice system, twisting it to the will of powerful political and corporate forces. But here's the shocking part. Removing a Supreme Court judge? Unthinkable. For years, this judge had been manipulating the law, shutting down cases that should have been heard, favoring billion-dollar corporations over ordinary citizens, and shaping constitutional rulings to benefit a select few. This wasn't just a few bad decisions. It was a systemic problem, and Bondi wasn't the only one who saw it. Lawyers, lawmakers, even other judges had all noticed, but no one had the courage to take action. The system wasn't built to challenge a Supreme Court judge. It was designed to protect them, no matter the cost. Behind the scenes, Bondi's allies whispered of a quiet coup, an orchestrated effort to take over the judiciary, erode its independence, and install judges who would turn a blind eye to corruption. And this rogue judge, he was their inside man. Bondi's path to justice wouldn't be easy, though. Every time she uncovered a new lead, it seemed to disappear. Witnesses vanished, documents were lost, and her own team faced sabotage. It was like fighting a ghost, but she knew one thing. This wasn't just about one judge. This was about the soul of the entire legal system, and the fight for justice was just beginning. Pam Bondi knew she had entered dangerous territory. The case she had stumbled upon was unlike anything she had faced in her career. A Supreme Court judge, someone who should have been above reproach, had turned rogue. Their decisions not only unjust, but designed to shift the balance of power in the country. The judge's rulings weren't just controversial. They were actively undermining the independence of the judiciary and favoring elite political interests. A betrayal of everything the justice system was supposed to stand for. But this wasn't just a rogue judge making bad decisions. This was a calculated, deliberate campaign to undermine the very foundations of the law. Bondi's path forward was anything but clear. She was up against one of the most powerful figures in the nation's judicial system. And removing a Supreme Court judge? That was unheard of. Unthinkable, even. The law wasn't built to remove someone at that level. It was designed to protect them, no matter how corrupt they became. For years, this judge had been slowly and steadily twisting the law in favor of the rich and powerful. Cases that should have been taken to trial were shut down with no explanation. Corporations were protected at the expense of everyday citizens. And worst of all, the judge had been manipulating constitutional interpretations to benefit a select few who had the money and connections to sway their decisions. This was no longer about justice. It was about control. Bondi wasn't alone in recognizing the gravity of the situation. Lawyers, lawmakers, and even other judges had whispered about the increasing number of questionable decisions, but no one had dared to confront it directly. The system was designed to protect its own, and the idea of challenging a Supreme Court judge seemed like a suicide mission. No one wanted to be the one to pull that trigger. But then, behind closed doors, Bondi's most trusted allies began to speak of something that had never been spoken aloud: a coup, a silent, insidious takeover of the judiciary by those who sought power at any cost. And at the center of this was the rogue judge, an inside man whose influence was reaching farther than anyone had imagined. Building a case against the judge was not easy. Every time Bondi thought she had a breakthrough, it slipped through her fingers. Key witnesses who had agreed to testify suddenly backed out. Important documents mysteriously disappeared. It was as if the entire system was working against her. Just when it seemed like the walls were closing in, a former Supreme Court clerk reached out to Bondi with a desperate plea: "Meet me in secret." When Bondi arrived, she saw a man who looked as if he were on the verge of a nervous breakdown. He kept glancing over his shoulder, afraid someone might be watching. He was terrified, but he knew this was his only chance to do the right thing. "They're watching everything," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I can't stay silent anymore." He handed Bondi a small USB drive, and with it, the evidence she had been desperately searching for. Inside the drive was a trove of damning information, emails, communications, and evidence of direct involvement between the judge and powerful corporate lobbyists. The judge wasn't just making bad decisions, they were pre-deciding cases, selling out the people they were sworn to protect, and accepting millions in bribes. It was the smoking gun. The proof of corruption so undeniable that it could bring the entire judicial system to its knees. Bondi and her team worked tirelessly to analyze the files. What they uncovered was worse than anyone had anticipated. This wasn't just a case of a corrupt judge. This was a betrayal of the entire justice system, a full-scale assault on the integrity of the law. The implications were staggering. If Bondi exposed this corruption, it wouldn't just rock the Supreme Court, it could lead to a complete breakdown of the legal system. The very foundation of American democracy was at risk. But there was one huge problem. The judge knew she was onto them. Bondi had made the mistake of underestimating just how far the judge was willing to go to protect themselves. And now they were coming for her. Before Bondi could make her move, the judge struck back. Suddenly, her team was inundated with lawsuits, subpoenas, and a media blitz designed to ruin her credibility. Anonymous sources began leaking stories about her, stories that accused her of everything from fraud to political bias. The news outlets that had once hailed her as a champion of justice now labeled her a power-hungry prosecutor, someone more interested in gaining influence than in protecting the law. The threats started coming next. One by one, Bondi's key allies received anonymous warnings: drop the case or suffer the consequences. But Bondi refused to back down. She couldn't. If she did, the Supreme Court would remain untouchable, beyond any scrutiny, above the law. The very idea of holding a judge accountable would become an impossibility, and corruption would continue to spread unchecked. With nowhere else to turn, Bondi made her move. She filed an official judicial misconduct complaint, demanding an emergency hearing. The legal world was in turmoil. Experts and pundits debated whether such a move was even possible. Politicians claimed she was overstepping her bounds. But the public was outraged. For the first time in history, Americans saw what had been happening behind closed doors. The stories Bondi had been trying to tell for so long finally found their way into the spotlight. Social media erupted in outrage. Protesters took to the streets, holding signs that read, "No one is above the law." The momentum was shifting. As the pressure mounted, the Supreme Court had no choice but to act. For the first time, it felt as if the system might actually hold itself accountable. But Bondi wasn't out of the woods yet. Just when she thought she had the upper hand, she faced the biggest betrayal of all. Someone from her own team, someone she had trusted, switched sides. Suddenly, confidential documents, the very evidence that could have taken down the rogue judge, were leaked to the opposition. Evidence vanished. Key witnesses, once eager to testify, began to back out. The case that had seemed like a slam dunk was falling apart. And the judge? They were laughing, because if Bondi failed now, if she couldn't prove her case, it wouldn't just be a loss. It would be the end of her career. The fate of the entire judicial system was hanging by a thread. The moment Bondi had been preparing for had finally arrived, but it wasn't the grand triumph she had envisioned. It was far more complicated, far more dangerous. The judge, who had been the embodiment of judicial corruption, arrogance, and absolute power, was now facing the consequences. But the question was, would it be enough to topple a system that had long been compromised? The legal world was already abuzz. Bondi had set the stage. The media was tearing apart the judge's legacy, exposing the depth of the corruption that had been silently growing for years. Yet, as the tension reached a boiling point, something unexpected happened. Bondi had underestimated the lengths to which her opponent would go to keep their grip on power. Just as Bondi thought she had the upper hand, an anonymous tip sent everything spiraling into chaos. The very files she had used to expose the judge's underhanded dealings, documents that had been collected with meticulous care, mysteriously vanished from her secure servers. Just like that, the evidence was gone. The next blow was even more personal. Her trusted allies, those who had stood by her through thick and thin, began to waver. They started to question her actions, implying that she was overstepping her bounds. A few withdrew their support, while others outright betrayed her. But it didn't end there. She began receiving a barrage of ominous messages, some veiled threats, others direct warnings. The words were chilling. "Back off, or this will end very badly for you." But Bondi, more determined than ever, didn't flinch. The stakes had become even higher now, not just for her career, but for the very fabric of the justice system. She knew the truth. She had the smoking gun, and no matter how powerful the forces against her were, she wasn't going to back down. The heat was on, and as Bondi prepared to present her evidence to the highest court, she realized that she had to do something completely unexpected. She couldn't just rely on the slow grind of the legal process anymore. Time was running out. Her back was against the wall. The system was rigged. She needed something that would not only shake the foundations of the judiciary, but would force the public to see the truth. So she did something that no one anticipated. She turned the spotlight on the public, and more specifically, the court of public opinion. In the dead of night, with the help of an insider, Bondi launched a covert operation. A website went live, one that would change everything. The site contained every single incriminating detail: emails, documents, recordings, and even visual evidence that tied the judge to corporate lobbyists, secretive deals, and illegal payments. It was a full-scale expose of the judge's corruption, and it was available to the world instantly. The website went viral within hours. News anchors, once loyal to the judge, were now scrambling to cover their tracks, desperate to explain how they had missed such a huge scandal. Lawmakers, who had been silent or complicit, now found themselves in the middle of a firestorm. Social media exploded with outrage. People took to the streets in droves, chanting, protesting, demanding action. "No one is above the law," they shouted. Bondi knew she had struck a nerve, but she also knew that this was just the beginning. The judge wasn't going to give up without one final fight. Suddenly, a new twist emerged. An insider, someone who had once been loyal to the judge, came forward. With a trembling voice, they confirmed everything Bondi had been fighting for. On live television, they broke the silence, revealing first-hand accounts of the judge's illicit activities, the hidden payments, and the collusion with powerful corporate forces. With this new information, Bondi's case became unshakable. The judge's defense began to crumble, and the once untouchable figure now faced a public reckoning. The final blow came when an emergency session of the Supreme Court was called. Bondi stood before the court, presenting her case with unyielding precision. This wasn't just a legal battle, it was a battle for the soul of the nation's justice system. And in a shocking turn of events, something that had never been done before, the Supreme Court ordered the immediate suspension of the judge. The very person who had once seemed untouchable, invincible, was now suspended pending further investigation. Bondi had done it. She had exposed the truth, and no amount of political influence could shield the rogue judge from the consequences anymore. But as the dust began to settle, Bondi's triumph was bittersweet. The battle was far from over. The judge had been a symbol, but they weren't the only corrupt force at play. Bondi knew that this fight wasn't just about one judge. It was about an entire system that had been rotting from the inside out. She had shaken the foundation of the Supreme Court, but now she had to prepare herself for the aftermath. The real war was only just beginning. As the dust began to settle and the rogue judge's suspension became a reality, Pam Bondi stood in the eye of the storm, knowing the hardest part was yet to come. She had shaken the Supreme Court's foundation, but this was just the beginning. The legal world would never be the same again. But the question remained, what was the next move? Bondi had won a monumental victory, one that few thought was possible. A Supreme Court judge, one of the most powerful figures in the country, had been taken down, albeit temporarily. This victory wasn't just for Bondi, but for every American who had lost faith in a system that was supposed to protect them. But despite her success, Bondi knew there was a long road ahead. She had exposed corruption, yes, but there were more judges, more political forces at play, all working tirelessly to regain control. The battle was far from over. In the days that followed, the media frenzy was nothing short of historic. Every news outlet covered the case. Debates erupted on TV, and social media exploded with opinions. People who had once been skeptical of Bondi's actions now rallied behind her, demanding that the justice system be held accountable. It was a moment of unity, an era of reckoning. Yet in the midst of it all, Bondi couldn't help but feel a creeping unease. She had won the battle, but what about the war? The Supreme Court's decision to suspend the rogue judge was a turning point, but it was also a reminder of just how deep the corruption went. There were systems in place to protect those in power, and Pam knew that dismantling them wouldn't be easy. It would require more than just one successful battle. It would require an entire movement. Bondi had always been a fighter. Her career, her reputation, and her legacy were built on challenging the status quo. But this fight, this was personal. This wasn't just about a judge or a political party. This was about the integrity of a system that millions of people depended on. And Pam wasn't about to let it all fall apart. In the end, the lesson was clear. No one, no matter how powerful, was above the law. The rogue judge had been a symbol of what could go wrong when power was unchecked. But their removal was a victory not just for Pam, but for every American who believed in the ideals of justice, fairness, and equality under the law. But even as she celebrated her triumph, Bondi knew the hardest part of the journey was yet to come. The fight for a fair judicial system was just beginning. The system was broken, and Pam Bondi was ready to fix it. The real challenge was to ensure that what happened to this one judge wasn't a rare anomaly, but the beginning of lasting change. Pam Bondi was ready to keep fighting. The real question was, would the system be able to handle the truth she was about to uncover? The fight isn't over yet, and your voice matters more than ever. Pam Bondi's victory is a beacon of hope, but it's only the beginning of a much bigger battle. The corruption we've exposed is just the tip of the iceberg, and we need to keep pushing for change. If you believe in the power of justice, in the strength of the people, and in the idea that no one is above the law, now is your moment to act. Here's what you can do. Subscribe to the channel to stay updated on the latest developments and deep dives into the judicial system. We're just getting started, and you don't want to miss what's coming next. Like this video if you think Pam Bondi's bold stand for justice is worth celebrating. Every like counts as a vote for fairness and accountability in our legal system. Share this story with your friends, family, and on social media. Let's spread the word far and wide. The more people who know the truth, the stronger our collective voice becomes. Comment below with your thoughts on this case. Do you think more judges are hiding in the shadows? What can we do to ensure justice is truly blind? We want to hear from you because your voice makes a difference. Pam Bondi fought for justice, but she can't do it alone. Together, we can make sure that what happened here doesn't stay a one-time victory, but sparks a movement that holds the powerful accountable, no matter where they sit. This is your chance to be part of something bigger. Don't wait. Act now. Let's make history together.